Welcome to our Gifts of God Sunday Talk, and I'm so glad to be here. We are still in Doha, Qatar, and it's been an interesting week. Some chops and turns and changing of plans, and many opportunities to judge the situation, but I think we passed. I think we passed the test. So what happened was we were supposed to go to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and we had our tickets all booked and had what we thought was a plan. We had an organizer there who had a center, and we were going to do some workshop, and then we were going to do some sessions like we do here. And a couple days before we were to leave, I texted her and I said, well, we still don't have a place to stay. You were going to tell us where we should stay near your center. We don't even know where your center is, let alone have a hotel nearby. So I sent a text to inquire about that. And then she texted me back and said, well, my staff will handle it. I'm not even going to be here. So it was like, what? You're not even going to be there? And we've traveled all this way and tried to develop a relationship with you. And at that point also, we didn't have many enrollments for the workshop. And then to hear that our organizer wasn't even going to be there, and we didn't have a place to stay, it was a bit disconcerting. So we shifted gears. We called a couple people that had hooked us up with this organizer, and got their opinion about the situation. And then push came to shove, and the decision was it would just be better to not even go. So what we did was we stayed here in Qatar an extra week. There were a lot of people already lined up who wanted sessions with us. So we thought, well, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush that aren't even there. So we just stayed here in the hand and saw the people who wanted to see us, and our schedule was filled up. And so we've been busy, and our really wonderful organizer here got us another little gig in another yoga studio over the weekend. So we did a little workshop on Saturday and had some people and saw a few more clients from that. So everything's been good here in Qatar. And yesterday we talked about grace in the mantra breathing, and I wanted to continue with that because I really felt that grace was in operation here. Certainly nothing I did. In fact, everything that I did fell apart, So what's that saying? The best laid plans of mice and men. Something like that, some Shakespeare saying, and Steinbeck wrote a book on it, of Mice and Men. So the best laid plans can often turn totally upside down, and they look terrible, and you've got to do something else. So I just remember when I got that text, the first thing I said to Sandra, because I could feel myself getting activated, I said that lesson, I think it's 233 or no, it's 243 maybe. Today I will judge nothing that occurs. Today I will judge nothing that occurs. Yeah, I think it's 243. Yeah. And then the next one is I'm in danger nowhere in the world. Yeah. So I was saying to Sandra, I said, well, today we will judge nothing that occurs. Meanwhile, you're kind of feeling like, you know, like, oh, what are we going to do? You know, and then you're thinking, oh, I'm not supposed to judge anything, and catch yourself. So at first I wanted to kind of make the lady wrong and send her a text and say, what do you mean? And da-da-da. And then I ended up in the end, after I just kept my mouth shut for 24 hours. And then, you know, of course, I told her we weren't coming. And then I said, well, whatever, I apologize for anything in me that was not clear about this. So I think I took a stance where I was taking responsibility. And then also, because we have friends that are also rebirthers, so I was processing myself, saying, well, the thoughts I had that created this result for me were, and then I listed, like, you know, 10 of my negative thoughts, or a few of my negative thoughts that might have made this thing happen. So I was taking as much responsibility as I could. And then, okay, so I let go after that, and things worked out. We had a great week, and we saw some really wonderful things here in Qatar that we wouldn't have seen because we didn't have time. But because we had a whole week and we weren't pressured, we saw some really beautiful things. And one was this museum for Islamic art that, oddly enough, the National Art Gallery in Washington has a modern wing, right? There's like the old wing, the west wing, and then there's the east wing building. And this building was designed by this famous architect, I.M. Pei. And he was the architect that designed this building in Doha for the Islamic art, right? So it's wonderful, you know, to go there and see the similarities of his work and see the building, and also this incredible artwork from, you know, 1,000 years of history. And it was just really beautiful. So we had a good time. So Grace, I think it was in operation whether I knew it was or not. And I think that's the point I want to make, is that there is a bit of a surrender when it comes to bringing the principles in the Course in Miracles into application. Because we have to let go of kind of our left brain, controlling, managing, you know, that part of our thought system that wants to figure it out, wants to see it all fall into place ahead of time. We don't usually like the big unknown coming in there and throwing a monkey wrench in things. But why not? It might turn out better if we don't know what we're doing. If we just admit we don't know what we're doing and say, okay, all right, divine forces, like, what is it you have in store? And I think I was kind of pushed to that wall this week, and I didn't like being there. But then once I was willing to be there without a whole lot of reaction and a whole lot of fear. I mean, I could have gone into fear. I think maybe I had a little bit of that for the first 20 minutes. But then after we kind of worked through it, and then we made this decision we were not going to go. And then I had to get other things in place, you know, change the airline ticket and get a new airline ticket, et cetera, et cetera. Once I had that kind of in motion, then I kind of went back to relaxing again, and Grace just sort of kicked in and filled up our schedule, and we met some really great people that we wouldn't have met otherwise. And so all was good. always good. And it wasn't because I made it good. It was because life had me go this way and then that way, and that way was better than going this way. So, hallelujah. So that's been our week. Yeah, I wanted to read this lesson. You know, there are 2 lessons about grace. I mean, there may be some more, but there are these 2 main lessons about grace. It's like lesson 168. Your grace is given me, I claim it now. And then 169 is by grace I live, by grace I am released. Those 2 lessons. So I wanted to look at those a little more closely, perhaps, in this talk. And I think the last time we gave a talk, I took a lesson and we kind of went into it deeply. Or maybe it was a piece of the text, I can't remember. But it was something that we looked at and I was reading. And so I wanted to do a little bit of that this week. So this is lesson 168. Your grace is given me and I claim it now. That says, God speaks to us, and shall we not speak to him? He's not distant. He makes no attempt to hide from us, but we try to hide from him and suffer from deception. He remains entirely accessible. He loves his Son. There is no certainty but this, yet this suffices. He will love his Son forever. When his mind remains asleep, he loves him still. And when his mind awakes, he loves him with a never-changing love. Well, okay, so how much are we talking to God? And if we are we hearing anything? And are we certain he's listening? And do we have this kind of a dialogue with our Creator? That's basically what that's saying, isn't it? God's always speaking to us, but are we listening? And then are we communicating back? So I think that this is quite a good argument for sometime in your day. You know, Tarsing used to just call it quiet time. He didn't call it meditation. He didn't teach us all these techniques of do this, do that. No, he just said, sit quiet and just observe yourself and observe your mind. And he didn't give you anything other than that. So I think that's what the Course is leading us to. It's a kind of a presence. We show up. We drop everything else. And I think that's important too. You gotta drop everything else to show up for this conversation with God. You can't be like halfway there. You got to be fully there. And so that means you got to drop everything else. And I don't know if we can. He would call that just your time, your quiet time. Very seldom would he call it meditation. He would just say, it's time to sit quiet. And he would just say, sit quiet, sit quiet. And that's what we always did. You know, he had this prayer room in his foundation, and the foundation was just in a house. It just was a regular house in Los Angeles near the Miracle Mile, you know, near the art museum there, about 4 or 5 blocks from there. And in this house, there was a room, and it had a blue carpet in it, like a brilliant blue carpet, dark blue carpet. And then around the room, he had pictures of holy beings, and he had an altar. and he had a couple of candles and a altarpiece, like a cross, that he got in a antique store somewhere. It was from a church. And so he had that on the altar, 2 candles, the cross. And then he had a picture of Krishnamurti and Dr. Shukman and Jesus above the altar. And then all these other holy beings around. So we would go in there and just, he had Zafu pillows all around the edge of the room. And you'd just pull up a pillow and sit. And maybe you'd sit for, I don't know, half an hour. And he would usually come in around 7 o'clock and give a talk for about an hour. And so in 7 o'clock in the morning, or about maybe 5:30 in the afternoon, he would always go to the prayer room and give a little talk. And so we would just be in there being quiet, doing our own talking to God, whatever that was for us. And it just seemed so natural. And then during the day, you would do work, whatever your work was, at the foundation. If you were there, of course, you were doing work for the foundation. It could be whatever you were working on, it could have been the tape department or correspondence department or something. So you would just help in the office there. And then we'd have a talk in the morning, a talk in the evening, and good meals, good lunch, good dinner. And somebody would prepare that. Some people worked in the kitchen. And it was like an ashram that didn't look like an ashram. It just looked like a house people lived in, And it was so delightful to not have all that religiosity kind of added to it. So I felt that was a lot of grace, influx into my life. I met Tara Singh in '89, and then I knew he was my teacher, and I just kept doing his workshops. And then the more workshops I did, of course, the closer I got to him. And then at some point, he invited me to come to the foundation to spend some time. And I would go for a week or 2. I remember once I went for 6 weeks, and he would feed the people there. You would have a place to stay and meals and 2 talks a day, and then whatever work you did, you would do for your service work at the foundation. And it was beautiful. It was grace. Yeah, and I think that for me, the whole relationship with him was grace. Like, I don't know how I came about him. I was in this bookstore. I was studying the course for a couple of years, and I was in this friend's bookstore. She owned this kind of a new agey metaphysical bookstore, I guess you'd call it, metaphysical bookstore. And I was in there browsing the shelves, and I saw this set of cassette tapes back in the day where, remember cassette tapes? I don't know if kids nowadays would even know what that is. It's like a little square thing with tape going around, and you stick it in a machine. Well, so there were these cassettes on the Course in Miracles by Tara Singh. It said, Bringing the Course in Miracles into Application by Tara Singh. So I bought the tapes. I thought, well, that's something I need to get deeper with this work, whatever it is. And I listened to the tapes, and it wasn't like anything I'd ever heard. He was talking about the Course, but he was also talking about other things and how my mind works and how I distract myself. And, all of my worst nightmares, he knew exactly how they worked, and he'd talk about them. And so it was amazing. You know, everything that he said was so true. And then one thing I realized as I was listening to the tape, you know, maybe the talk was an hour long. So as I was listening and kind of observing my mind, because he would be pointing out how your mind works, right? What you're usually thinking, and you'd be observing that in yourself, and you'd be saying, yep, I think like that. And then you'd notice after a while, your thought would slow down. So let's just say you have a thought, then you have another thought, then you have another thought, and there's one fires, then another. Well, after a while, you'd have a thought, then there'd be a gap. Then you'd have another thought, and then a bigger gap, until finally you were more with the gap than you were with the thought. You would be in that space where you wouldn't have the thoughts. And through listening to him, gradually, you'd be in that emptiness. You'd be in that stillness. You know, the Course calls it the stillness of the peace of God. There's even a lesson. The stillness of the peace of God is mine. So you'd experience that. It would be this really deep kind of you'd sink into this deep peace, this deep silence. And also I noticed, you know, I've done some mushroom trips, and on a mushroom trip, your senses are really heightened. It's like you smell 10 times better, you hear 10 times better, you see 10 times more clearly, something like that. Well, Taurusing could put you in that state just talking to you. Didn't need the mushrooms. You would get in that empty space, right? That sort of silence. And you'd notice that your senses are just super sensitive, you know, like just almost you see everything at once, right? Or you feel everything at once. It makes a kind of a connectivity. So you felt that connectivity to your environment, to your senses, to your body, to everything. So rather than dull yourself, you were actually awakening yourself. And you were also slowing down your thinking. I don't think we realize how distracted we are by thought. You know, like we're almost not even ever here because we're so much in the thought. So we're not even here in present time because we're just constantly paying attention to what we're thinking, right? Which is either in the past or in the future, but it's not here in the present, right? So we're always like kind of double thinking ourselves, and that prevents us from being here. And that also blocks the grace. So we're not really feeling the grace either. Well, what I noticed when I listened to this tape by Tara Singh, right? I noticed this phenomenon happening where my thoughts were slowing down, the gap was getting bigger, there was this kind of encounter with this silence, and it was undeniable. I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. Fortunately for me, and I think this was probably Babaji arranging things ahead of time, before I met Tara Singh, I had gone to India one time with Sundaray, and I met this man that had taken over the ashram when Babaji left his body and took samadhi. He left the ashram in the hands of this man named Muniraj. And Muniraj was a saintly person by his own right. And so the first time I went with Sandra to India, I met this man, Muniraj, and there was another gentleman, Sastraji. So I met Muniraj and Sastraji. And Muniraj didn't speak a lot of English, nor did Sastraji. So when you met them, you didn't say a whole lot, and they didn't say a whole lot. But one thing you noticed was you entered into this kind of a atmosphere. You know, it was like a vortex or an atmosphere, and it had the quiet in it. That atmosphere had this silence in it, and they weren't doing anything. You would just enter into their presence, and automatically you would come into this kind of atmosphere of silence, you know? And Judith, you probably met Muniraj, right? Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Well, you'd enter into this place where they were, and you'd notice that your mind would just like kind of surrender and let go and stop. There'd be this silence around them, and you would enter into that silence. Well, so when I went with Sandra to India the first time, I met these gentlemen, and I had this experience, right? So what is this silence? And in India, they call it darshan. And you know, teachers in India, they don't get there just because they studied in a school. They get to be teachers where people come to see them because they are in that state of being. You know, they really are in that enlightened state of being. And who knows how they got there, but they're there. And that's why people go to see them, and they call that darshan. It's like you go and you're in the presence of a holy being or an enlightened being. And when you're in the presence, they transmit this energy to you. And this energy kind of transforms you, and you enter into a different state of being in yourself. I would call that grace, right? This state of grace, you enter into that. And it's nothing that you did, like you just showed up, right? And because they are who they are, they can bring you into this sort of vortex of the grace. And you feel the silence, and you feel the, I don't know, just the peace and the deep rest, the deep silence, the deep peace, the deep quiet, whatever you want to call that. And once you've experienced that, you'll never forget it. You know, like then, okay, maybe 5 minutes later, you're back in the world and you're doing all the things you always did, and bumping into people and worrying about the future, and you know, all the things you didn't do in the past. You know, you're back into the chatter again, but you never quite go fully back, because you know you had this experience where you're totally out of it. And it was real. It was like more real than real. And so, okay, so I went to India with Sandra, and then I had that experience. So let's fast forward about a year later, or I don't know, maybe 2 years later. I'm in this bookstore, and I get this tape by Tara Singh. And okay, I start listening to it. And I noticed, like, wow, you know, it's like he is doing the same thing with his words that Sastraji and Muniraj did, just with their presence, right? So even though Tara Singh wasn't there in the room, he wasn't physically there, he was speaking, he was transmitting something with his words. And I was listening to his words. And the same thing was happening to me listening to the words that happened to me when I was with Muniraj and Sastraji in India. And I thought, wow, this is interesting that he's transmitting this quality through speaking. All right, so I listened, and I had the experience. And then later on, I got to know, well, where is he and where does he live and what's he doing? And, and then they told me, oh, he's giving a workshop in New York. And so I signed up and I went and I met him for the first time. And same thing, of course, same kind of energy he was transmitting in person that he was on the tape. In fact, I didn't really see much difference. I could get in the same state of peace listening to him on an audio tape that I could if I was in person with him, because for him there was no difference. He was just telling the truth and speaking whatever came to him, and it was what it was, right? And it's the truth that was awakening. And so I would listen to his words and I would get in that state. And in it, I could do it through a tape or I could do it in person. It was a little more powerful in person, especially if you were there with him one-on-one. I must say that was like more powerful because, of course, you're on the hot seat, and if he asks you a question and you say something stupid, of course he's going to call you on it, right? So you're a little bit more nervous around a one-on-one meeting than on a tape where you can hide a little easier. But anyhow, that was my encounter with Grace, with Tara Singh, and I think I needed that first push from Muniraj and Sastraji to be able to recognize what it actually was I was encountering. So you see kind of how Grace prepared me to get more grace. It's like, yes, I went to India. I wasn't planning to have that experience, but I had it. And then once I listened to Tara Singh's work, I already knew I already had felt that. I already knew what that feeling was. So when I was feeling it from his words, I knew what it was. I said, well, this guy, he's not just some blah, blah, blah about A Course in Miracles. There's some state of being he's in that's transcendent of even the Course in Miracles. Well, then I found out later, much later, he had been a student of Krishnamurti for 30 years. And then even later than that, I found out that he was sharing the Course because Dr. Shukman had told him to. And he had been her student for a couple of years, where he called her every day at the same time. So when you think about it, is there anybody you could call at the same time every day without missing for 2.5 years? It would be a challenge, wouldn't it? I mean, even if it's somebody you have a lot of respect for. So that was his tutelage with Dr. Shukman. So he was able to transmit the Course in Miracles pretty clearly, and not just about it. It's like he could transmit the energy that it was, the actual thing, Now you could say, well, was he in the Christ consciousness? I think looking back, I would have to say he was. He would never claim that he was. He would never say, oh, I've mastered the Course in Miracles. He would never say that. But did he? I mean, as far as I was concerned, he was coming from that space, that energy field of the Christ consciousness, and he could transmit it. And his love was, absolute. But also his love wasn't going to put up with your baloney either. Like, one of the qualities of absolute love is it can't be deceived by stuff that's not love. So we're going to bring everything to the table that we think is love that's not love, and love is not going to fall for it. you know? So that's what a teacher does. He doesn't fall for your deceptions. He doesn't fall for them. You may think, oh, I've made it. I've done it. I've arrived. And you're not even close, right? But you don't know that. But a teacher would know that and point it out to you. And then you'd be shocked for a while. And then you'd see, oh, yeah, they're right. I really wasn't as far along as I thought. So that's usually what a teacher does. He kind of points out how much farther you need to go. And he's never gonna tell you you've arrived. Never. Which is okay, you know? I remember reading this thing about Rumi, and he had this teacher, Shams, right? And the way his teacher recognized him and he recognized the teacher was the teacher asked him, he saw this guy on the road, right? And he says, well, who is greater, Muhammad or this other character, right? He asked Rumi, who's greater? And I forget the name of the other character, but the other character was saying, he was praising God and saying how great God was and all of God's great qualities. And, oh, isn't it great that we're so in this vibe of the divine? And he was just praising. And then when Muhammad was talking, he was saying, we don't fully know God, and there's always another step that we need to take. And in saying that, he made himself greater because he left the possibilities that were endless open. Whereas the other guy shut the door and said, well, I've already arrived, right? I'm already in the God vibe. Well, which was a lie. And Muhammad wasn't willing to lie. He was saying, yes, God is great, and there's so much more we can realize about God. And in saying that, he was telling the truth, and he was leaving the possibilities for his own ascension even higher. Whereas if he'd have claimed to have known it, you cut it off, So that was beautiful, and that was always how Tara Singh was, He would question us on the Course in Miracles, and he would question us on to what degree are you bringing it into application, and he would focus the energy so that you would receive what the lesson was trying to transmute to you or transmit to you, but he would never accept your answer. You would want to give an answer, and he would never take that as face value. He says there's something even beyond your thinking that is closer to it. And if you conclude, and if you jump to these conclusions and you claim to know and you claim to say, well, it's this, then you've cut off those other avenues, right? So I think that's what happened to us this week. And I didn't quite know at first what was happening because I was activated, Oh, your organizer just said they're not even going to be there for you, and you got your tickets already made, and, and you don't even know where you're going to stay, and blah, blah, blah. And now here's kind of a monkey wrench in the whole thing. And now we got to shift on our feet and do something. And I must say, there's that saying, the path of least resistance. You've heard that, right? That saying, take the path of least resistance. Well, I must say that it operated very well in this case, because when we stepped back and we looked at it and we said, okay, what's going to be the easiest thing for us to pull off in this situation? And we're staying here in this Hilton Hotel in Doha, and it's very beautiful, and our room is fantastic. We have this big kind of suite room with a nice little living area and a little kitchenette if we wanted to make our own food. And it's just beautiful. And it's not a whole lot of money. I mean, it's not exorbitantly priced. So we said, well, let's just stay here for another week, and that's the easiest thing to do. And we'll just see the clients that wanted to see us that we didn't have time to see. And that'll pay our bill. So what are we worried about? Why should we be upset? Why should we even be upset with the woman that didn't pull through for us? We don't have to be. In fact, maybe it was life just saying, don't go there, go stay here. And that's how it had to unfold, So I think when we got behind that and shifted gears, it just flowed without any effort. And it was the path of least resistance, and nobody was made wrong, and we're happy. And our friends that we're working with here, they were happy. We were staying an extra week. So that was my experience of grace operating this week. I don't think it could be anything other than that. And I think we're all going to have those examples where the plan doesn't work. The plan that we planned doesn't work. And then what? Well, then it's not our plan. It's God's plan. It's the grace plan. Yeah. So let's just look at this this lesson. I want to get through this whole thing, this whole lesson. Your grace is given me, I claim it now. Well, God speaks to us, okay? Shall we not speak to him? But sometimes God's going to speak to us in like our plan going wrong, and it's not going to work, and we got to do something else, right? That could be God speaking to us. And are we going to listen, or are we going to judge it, fight it, resist it, paddle upstream, try to force it? Well, we said, no, we're not going to try to force this. We could go and find our own place to stay and be there with the ladies' staff and try to make it work. And we just said, nope, we're not going to do that. We're just going to stay put and take our losses, which in the end were our gains, and just stay here. So that's what we did. And God spoke to us and we listened. And then he said, don't judge anything, just move on. So we did that. If you but knew the meaning of his love, hope and despair would be impossible. For hope would be forever satisfied, and despair of any kind unthinkable. His grace, his answer, is to all despair, for in it lies remembrance of his love. Would he not gladly give the means by which his will is recognized? His grace is yours by your acknowledgement, and memory of him awakens in the mind that asks the means of him whereby its sleep is done. Well, that's deep. It's like God is going to wake your mind up, but you have to be willing to flow with it. And you also have to be willing to not get into despair. I mean, it would have been really easy for us to fall into despair when something that sort of planned out, so to speak, with airline tickets and and connections on the other end, when it just totally kind of fell apart. It would have been easy to despair about it. Now, years ago, maybe when I had a little bit more of a money case and I was a little more watching my pennies, I would have got upset that we probably lost $1,000 worth of airline tickets, and then we had to buy another $1,000 worth of tickets to change the plan, right? So I probably lost $2,000 right off the bat. And it didn't, really bother me that much. And I just said, well, we're going to make the money back here doing private sessions. So I just let it go. And I don't know, I got enough money in the bank where losing $2,000 doesn't matter, and so at least I'm glad I'm past that, so I didn't have despair over the money. And, that was good. And we changed the plan and got the new tickets and everything's set in place. And so I'm back on track, and it happened relatively without effort, So let's see what this is a beautiful lesson, isn't it? If you but knew the meaning of his love, hope and despair would be impossible. Well, let's do that. I mean, don't we all want to know the meaning of his love when it says, if you but knew the meaning of his love, hope and despair would be impossible. For hope would be forever satisfied and despair of any kind unthinkable. His grace, his answer, is to all despair, for in it lies the remembrance of his love. So grace, remembrance of God's love, it's all the same. All the same. And he would he not gladly give the means by which his will is recognized? His grace is yours by acknowledgement. Okay, so it says, your grace is given me, and then it says, I claim it. I claim it now. So we have a role in this, right? We have to claim the grace. The grace is always there, but we're farting around, not paying attention, not receiving it, not claiming it, wondering why things go haywire, getting into despair. I mean, don't we all do this? I'm not just, trying to blame anybody. I fall into that trap myself sometimes. So this is saying, well, if you were in touch with the grace, you just sidestep the whole thing and move on, and some other plan is in store, and that is what it says, the means by which his will is recognized. The means by which his will is recognized. So the will was, don't go to Saudi Arabia. They're not prepared for you. Stay here. That was pretty simple, and it was joyous. Today we ask of God the gift he has most carefully preserved within our hearts, waiting to be acknowledged. This, the gift by which God leans to us and lifts us up, taking salvation's final step himself. Okay, well, there's that statement, the last step is God's step. And we just have to get ourselves in the right place, in the right mindset, cleansed enough, having let go of our grievances, our attack thoughts, our judgments, our whatever you want to call it. That's our responsibility to let all that stuff go. That prepares us for this final step. God's not going to make the final step and pick you up out of this hell you made up until you're willing to forgive everybody. And you've done it. Then you can truly say, well, I've prepared myself for this final step. All steps but this we learn, instructed by his voice. But finally he comes himself and takes us in his arms and sweeps away the cobwebs of our sleep. His gift of grace is more than just an answer. It restores all memories the sleeping mind forgot, all certainty of what love's meaning is. It restores all memories the sleeping mind forgot, all certainty of what love's meaning is. Well, don't we want to know what that is, that love's meaning? Don't we want to remember who we are as God created us? I mean, all those lessons in the workbook. Let me remember I'm one with God. Father, I will but to remember you. Let me remember what my purpose is. Let me remember that my goal is God. Let me remember that there is no sin. Now, let me remember God created me. You know, this remembering, or the memory of the present. You know, we think of the memory of stuff in the past, but what about the memory of this present moment that we've lost somehow? That's where the grace is. The memory of grace in this present moment. So that's where we're preparing ourselves to be when God takes this final step. Could be now. We don't have to wait. God loves his Son. Request him now to give the means by which this world will disappear, and vision first will come, with knowledge but an instant later. For in grace you see a light that covers all the world in love, and watch fear disappear from every face as hearts rise up and claim the light as theirs. What now remains that heaven be delayed an instant longer? What is still undone when your forgiveness rests on everything? Okay, does your forgiveness rest on everything? I let forgiveness rest upon all things, for thus forgiveness will be given me. $353, I think, or $343, or 342. No, it's 342. I let forgiveness rest upon all things, for thus forgiveness will be given me. And here it is. Now, what now remains that heaven be delayed an instant longer? What still undone when your forgiveness rests on everything? I let forgiveness rest upon all things, for thus forgiveness will be given me. That's the preparation. That's the place you need to be to receive the grace. It's a new day and holy day today, for we receive what has been given us. Our faith lies in the giver, not our own acceptance. We acknowledge our mistakes, but he to whom all error is unknown is yet the one who answers our mistakes by giving us the means to lay them down and rise to him in gratitude and love. Well, the means is the forgiveness, the means. He's given us the means, which is the forgiveness, to erase our mistakes. And he descends to meet us as we come to him. For what he has prepared for us, he gives and we receive. Such is his will because he loves his Son. To him we pray today, returning but the word he gave to us through his own voice, his word and his love. Your grace is given me, I claim it now. Father, I come to you, and you will come to me who ask. I am the Son you love. Well, there we are. Meeting God. You know, it started out saying, God is speaking to you. Will you speak to him? You know, I think that was the first line, right? God speaks to us. Shall we not speak to him? All right. There it is. Well, what are you going to say? What are you going to do? Forgive everything. Use the means. God will give you the grace. He'll give you the grace. He'll give you everything working in Doha if you let go of Riyadh and say, okay, I'm not supposed to go there. And nothing's wrong with that. And nobody's wrong with that over there. You let forgiveness rest upon all things. You don't have any judgments about anybody that bugged out last minute, cost you a couple grand in airfare. Okay, they didn't know what they were doing. So what? $2,000 down the drain. Who cares? I'm not going to get upset, and I want grace. What are we supposed to do here? Yeah, we were talking quite a lot to God for a couple of days straight. And then it all just fell into place and everything worked out. And we had let forgiveness rest upon all things. And we had sent our little notes of, hey, forgive us for our part. We're sorry, but we just can't come under these conditions. And too many variables, too many unknowns. And no, what do you say? No harm done. We're not blaming anybody. So that was good. That was different. And I think I passed some kind of test there. Because I noticed, was I really activated? Maybe for 20 seconds until, I kind of got myself. Then the first thing I said to Sandra, we're not going to judge anything that occurs today, okay? And it took us a little bit we had to keep that in our mind, but we got through it and everything was good. Well, thank you for joining for this. I think we all came to a new level, and this grace, we have to let go and let it in. And of course, we have to forgive everything. And that is not always easy. Especially when it seems like the plan is a good plan and we're doing our due diligence to make the plan work. And then all of a sudden, it's saying, nope, that's not the plan. And that's when we could have a reaction, And probably 5 years ago, I would have had a bigger reaction. I wouldn't have liked losing $2,000 right off the top, right like that. And I wouldn't have seen it quite so broadly. Yeah. So, but hey, fortunately, I'm not in the same place. Well, that's it for this week. And that's grace. By grace I live. By grace I will release. And your grace is given me. I claim it now. So let's claim our grace. Forgive everybody. Keep ourselves open to receive. And I think we'll be okay. All right. So I'll see you next week in Dubai. It'll be 10 o'clock my time next week, but I'm going to do it. I was determined this week. I'm going to make it. And I feel good and you feel good. Everything's good. So wish us well in Dubai. We leave on Tuesday. We'll see you next week and we'll do some podcasts. Yeah. All right. God bless everybody. Yeah.